Can you think of a movie that should be seen by everybody? That should be required viewing in classrooms? Won't You Be My Neighbor, the new documentary on Mr. Rogers, is exactly that. It is that good and it is that poignant, and I think it's needed for our society. Many of us grew up watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and if we didn't, we're at least familiar with who he is. He's the gentleman who is soft-spoken, who would walk into his house, take off his jacket, put on a sweater, take off his dress shoes and put on some tennis shoes, and all the while just be very nice and pleasant. He would teach us these life lessons along the way. We travel into his make-believe land via the neighborhood trolley, and there were all of these puppets voiced by Mr. Rogers. And through that, he would impart such wisdom and such life lessons for not only little kids, but also adults. Now the best part is though, that all of the messages were accessible by the children. And he believed that if you could reach the children, then you could affect the future. Mr. Rogers was an ordained minister. He was also a child psychologist. And through these two fields, he merged this love and this desire to help children be better, to be better people. And right there, in that moment, I think that's why everybody should see Won't You Be My Neighbor. The documentary is told through a series of interviews, not only with Rogers himself, but also his wife, his children, his friends, journalists, people that worked on the set even. He had a large influence on a whole lot of different people. And it talks about, in the documentary, not only just his interactions with people, but the way that he actually shaped culture. In one point, and if you've seen the trailer for this or even any other footage or news stories about this documentary, you see that he at one point shares a pool with a black man. Now this is a huge deal because at that time, African Americans were being thrown out of public pools because they couldn't share them with white people. How stupid is that, right? Right now, I mean, well, there is racial tension in our world right now, and it's unacceptable and it shouldn't be happening. But this is even happening back then. And so Mr. Rogers, as simple as it is, has his feet in a little kiddie pool. And he invites his African American police friend to share the pool with him. And they cool off their feet. And Mr. Rogers even shares his towel. That is huge because right there in these unspoken acts, he is showing visibly to these children who are watching and the rest of the world, look, we can be friends, we can coexist because we're just people. There's nothing different about us other than our skin color. So get over it and let's share the pool. It's hard to believe that there's a guy as nice as Fred Rogers. And you kept waiting for the other shoe to drop within this. Like there's going to be this gotcha moment in the documentary where, oh, here's the bad side that you never saw. Well, he didn't have one. That's the crazy thing. That this was a genuinely nice man who loved children, not in some creepy way where he's like some hidden sex pervert. No, he just genuinely cared for children and he genuinely cared for people. At one point in history, President Nixon was going to pull all of the funding for PBS in an effort to cut down the budget. Now it was minuscule. It was a $20 million budget. And in today's world, that doesn't even mean anything. I mean, $20 million for a government project for funding, that's a day's worth of something, right? So Mr. Rogers, though, goes to speak to the senators. And the one senator in particular is just hostile and he doesn't want to hear anymore. He's tired and basically he's made up his mind. And he tells everybody else that has yet to come to speak in front of him, don't read me any more of your statements. I don't want to be read to. If you have something to say, you can tell me. So Mr. Rogers puts his thing down and he talks to the senator. And in there, he even asks, can I share some lyrics to one of the songs that I sing on my show? And the senator's like, sure, go ahead. Mr. Rogers begins to just speak the words of this song. And it's about hate and how he has a choice and how he changes and how he doesn't choose the hate and the anger. Now, whether or not the documentary shows the entire interaction of Rogers at Congress, they show the reaction and the outcome from the senators. and it is amazing to see. There's a lot of humor throughout the documentary, not only from Rogers himself, but also the people that he interacted with. And you could really see how he treated everybody really well. Even from the hired stagehands or the people that were there just in and out the grips and all of these people that are behind the scenes who are really the workers of the show when Rogers is the star. Right? And sometimes we hear about how the stars are all snooty and they treat everybody else like garbage, or they don't even acknowledge them. And Mr. Rogers didn't do that. He interacted with these people and he had a sense of humor. And I think that was really great because in one of the stories that one of the stage workers, stage managers is telling, it really illustrates Rogers' ability to have a laugh and to share in the fun. And I think it just speaks to him as a person, his character, and who he was. You won't smile through the entire thing. You will cry in this because there are some moments that just elicit tears. And it's good. And you should see it and you should cry. And I think everybody really, really should see Won't You Be My Neighbor? Because like I said, it has messages that are pertinent today, that our nation, our culture, they need to see, they need to hear, we need to embrace it. We need more of Mr. Rogers in our life and on our televisions and in our movies. Now, I'm all for the blow 'em up action stuff, and that goes against what Mr. Rogers believed, because for me, it is entertaining. And maybe that's because I've grown up and been jaded all of this time. But his message still rings true that people matter and that we should care for them. There's no violence, no sex, a very tiny bit of brief nudity, maybe a couple of profane words. Very accessible for all ages. I give Won't You Be My Neighbor 5 out of 5 couches. Have you seen it? I would love to know your thoughts below in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.